And we're live. Sid Rosenberg, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great, Dylan. Great to be here on Breitbart.com. This is very exciting for me.
I know it's exciting for us, too. It's our first ever Skype interview on the sports page. And I told my bosses for the first interview, we had to make sure to get somebody who had even less hair than I do. So that's why I decided that was the main reason for having you on, Sid. You know, I mean, I know you know sports and all that stuff, but it's also, you know, I felt like we'd be able to bond, you know? It's important.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Just when I thought I made it to the point where people are acknowledging the talent that I've got, it always goes back to the amount of follicles that I don't have actually on my head. Thanks for that.
There you go. It takes one to know one. So, but I wanted to have you on because you occupy a very unique position in the world of sports media, the media in general. I mean, you have a great morning show there in WABC in New York with your partner there, Bernie McGurk, and a great listen on WABC, and that everybody should check out. Absolutely, Bernie and Sid, and you know, you do that, so you have a great big platform in New York for sports talk, but you also happen to be a Trump supporter. Now, as we talked about earlier, not a blind Trump supporter, not a Trump apologist by any means, but you're not afraid to say when he's doing a good job, and you're not afraid to compliment him on the good things that he does. And obviously, that's very unique in the world of sports media today. So that's why we wanted to have you on. But just to give everybody here a background about you, you've done a lot of unique stuff. I mean, when I first met you, I think we were at the Super Bowl together, and you were doing a Miami-based morning show, I think, with Michael Irvin.
I was. When I initially got fired from WFAN, Dylan, up in New York City, which, of course, is the industry standard. It always has been now, going on about 40 years in the world of sports. I got fired in 2005, headed back to my second home, Boca Raton, Florida. Ended up working on 3 different sports talk radio stations there in Miami. First, 790 The Ticket alongside Dan Le Batard. Then it was 560 WQAM. That's when I met you. And I was doing the morning show, and the midday show was occupied by former Dallas Cowboy Hall of Famer Michael Irvin, who, of course, was a very popular Miami Hurricane from his college football days and played his high school football at St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, where he's still a king. So Irvin and I became very, very close. That lasted a couple of years. He's back in Dallas and Los Angeles now. But, yes, that was my second stop in Miami. I went out to work at 640 AM Sports in Palm Beach with my buddies Eric Langell and Steve Zemak. And eventually, after a 11-year hiatus from New York City, I returned here to New York in 2016 to work with Bernard McGurk here at WABC.
Right, and that's where we met again, where we were both doing Radio Row for the fight between Cotto and was it Sergio Martinez, I think it was.
Very good. Yes,
a couple
right. Ago for HBO. And what's great about that night was I saw you that night. Moments before that, we had the pre-fight party at Lugo Italiano, right across the street from Madison Square Garden. Mike Tyson was there, and a whole others. And on that same exact night, that was a Stanley Cup playoff game between the New York Rangers and the Los Angeles Kings. The Rangers playing for the Cup. So New York City was really exciting that night. Major fight night at Madison Square Garden, and the Rangers on the road in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So the 2 times I saw you, Dylan, very, very exciting times.
Exactly. Great things have happened. And I know that's not going to be an exception to today either. great things are going to continue as well. No, seriously, one of my biggest moment my entire radio career was having Mike Tyson on my show. This is probably like 5 years ago. That day was actually when we were doing Radio Row. And he comes on the air, and I guess my producer told him my name. And he comes on, and he said, "What's up, Gibbon?" And just hearing like my childhood idol, you know, go, "What's up, Gibbon?" And I embarrassed myself for the entire 8 or 9 minutes of that, and whatever it was, I was basically a fawning child and not really a professional radio guy at all.
No, listen, I was the same way. I mean, I've interviewed Mike now many, many times, but the first time in Las Vegas, I was the same way. You know, I never bought into that Desiree Washington rape allegation. I thought Don King set him up even way back then. Always liked Mike, and if you've covered Mike as long as I have, and you've met him now, almost 20 years. I went to all of his fights out in Las Vegas for HBO. He is one of the nicest, easiest going guys. He and I have had some addiction issues that we share, so he likes to sit with me and kind of talk about that. But I always say this, You go to a big fight in Las Vegas. I don't care if it's Mayweather, De La Hoya, Mayweather, Pacquiao, and all the big stars come in. Denzel Washington, Clint Eastwood, the Kardashians, you name it. Nobody gets more attention by the hotel in that Las Vegas elevator than Mike Tyson. He's the guy. He's always been the guy. He'll always be the guy.
No question about it. The same thing when Bellator came to Houston a few years ago, and he stole the show. He stole the show, and he steals the show no matter where he is, and he's a champ, and that's why he'll always be the champ to guys of our age. There's no question about it. Just to give kind of an overview here, and again, you occupy this very unique position in the world of sports. It seems like the sports media has walked back their politics a little bit over the past year or so here. It seems like it's died down a little bit. You had, obviously, a couple of years ago, the Jemele Hill incident, and it seemed like ESPN every single day was giving us stories of political bias and, attacking the president, whatever. And it doesn't seem to be doing that anymore. It doesn't seem to be happening that way anymore. Do you agree that they've scaled it back somewhat here recently? And if so, why is that?
I don't think they have because they want to. I mean, look, the football season's over, and football has proven to be Teflon Don and bulletproof. So it really doesn't matter what the players do. They can kneel. The public can get upset. Donald Trump can get upset. Doesn't really matter, right? If Ray Rice knocks out his girlfriend in an elevator, doesn't really matter. Colin Kaepernick doesn't really matter. So I think we're coming to the point where we can't really mess with the NFL one way or the other. People just don't seem to care. Basketball, don't forget, early in the year we did have some issues, whether it's Golden State's head coach Steve Kerr or former Pistons head coach Stan Van Gundy or San Antonio head coach Greg Popovich. And certainly LeBron James, he feels very strongly about the president. So does Kevin Durant. So we know basically the two leagues that have taken their shots at the political forum have been basically football and basketball. Baseball does not do it. Hockey does not do it. Not even really an American sport at this point. It's really the NFL and the NBA. NFL's not working right now, and the NBA, they start the playoffs today, so they're concentrating on getting big ratings for their postseason. But all those guys still feel the same. Nobody's calmed down. They still despise Donald Trump. They're still angry about a ton of things. This despite the fact most of them are multi-millionaires.
Have you faced any backlash there in New York, whether just from people in New York or people in the sports media in New York or media in general for tweeting? I know you had President Trump on your show several months ago, and your buddy, your co-host there, Bernie, is obviously one of the most staunch supporters of the president that there is, and you obviously do as well. What has been the blowback for you?
Not much. Like you said, Bernard, my co-host, my wonderful co-host, God, I'm so lucky to have him. He is a really staunch supporter. I mean, he's one of those guys that no matter what Donald Trump does, he can't do any wrong. And I love Bernie, and he's fun to work with, and he's a very, very smart guy. But I can't stand that. I really can't. I'm sorry. Pat Riley lost games. Bill Parcells lost games. Vince Lombardi lost games. The idea that Donald Trump is perfect is so asinine and ridiculous that it does bother me. But I understand it. See, the right is so upset with the left and their attempts to discredit Donald Trump and their hate for Donald Trump that they keep digging in and digging in and digging in to make themselves feel better. But for me, I'm a rational guy. It doesn't really work for me. I like what Donald Trump has done. The important stuff, he's done a good job, right? The economy, the market, destroying ISIS. I like his foreign policy. I like the fact that Europe and countries like North Korea and Cuba and Iran can't take advantage of us anymore. I love all that. But the thing is, he does nothing wrong is beyond silly. He tweets stupid things. He says stupid things. Charlottesville was a D- for Donald Trump. He has done some other things along the way he disrespected John McCain. So the idea that Trump is perfect is silly. And I don't practice that. So I think that for the most part, people here know that. They think I'm a fair guy. They think I'm a rational guy. Look, I want to get more Democrats listening to the show. I don't want to be Fox News, white conservative America, all about. Look, I love Sean Hannity. Sean's a good friend of mine. I don't want to be that guy. I want Democrats listening. I want Republicans listening. I want Democrats to have a chance. If I go over the line every single candidate every single day, whether it's O'Rourke or Harris or Biden or Sanders, we're going to lose anybody with at least an open mind. So I'm not that guy. So I don't get much blowback because I think both sides appreciate that for the most part. I'm a rational, open-minded, that type of guy.
When you got a big platform there at WABC, but you also obviously travel the country following sports, and that's where we met. I think it was Indianapolis the first time. Yeah. So I mean,
the Patriots Super Bowl, which was a great time.
Oh, yes, it was. Yes, it was. You see the rest of the country. You're a New York guy, but you're exposed to the rest of the country, and you see the rest of the country. Do you feel that there's a massive disconnect right now between the coasts, between what happens, in New York with you and in California, where, a lot of the media, a lot of the liberal media is ensconced, and people in just regular America, places like Indianapolis, stuff like that? Do you feel like there is it seems to me there's a massive disconnect between people on the coast and people in the middle of the country, that there's not the same people? Do you sense that? And
there's no question. You should read Dana Loesch's book, Flyover Nation, which talks about all the states in the middle of the country that they've got the American flags outdoors. It's those kids, their kids that are fighting every single day in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're the ones that will blast the national anthem. No one will ever kneel in those states. Look, thank God electoral college, because if every state was like New York and California, a guy like Donald Trump could never win. That's the bottom line. Of course, these are liberals, and they've got their mindset. I've got Jewish relatives, for example. It has become very clear the last couple of weeks that a lot of these Democrats are anti-Semites. We know that. But my relatives will still vote D. It doesn't matter. It's like that in New York. It's like that in California. It's not like that in the middle of this country, and that's where Donald Trump was successful the first time around, and maybe again in 2020. So there is a disconnect. There is a bias, and there's just a way of doing things in these big states on both sides of the coast, New York and California, where they don't really look at the issues. They're not really caught up in the politics. They just fill out the box, while the rest of the country, I think, really pays attention to what's going on. To their credit, and quite frankly, to New York and California, our discredit.
Mm-hmm. As would I. as would I. How much do you blame the media for that dynamic? And obviously, it's not totally just the media, but the media, see, whether it's the politics media or the sports media. The sports media is always divisive because it's always, it's Cowboys, Packers, it's rivalry. You're feeding off emotion. Sports is all about emotion, and you're trying to hype people up. So it's always about that to an extent. But it seems like in recent years, the politics angle of it has come up more. How much of that division and that disconnect between the coasts is the fault of the media, and what can be done about it?
A huge part. Let's be honest. Whether it's network television, you're talking about CBS, NBC, Lester Holt and those guys, ABC, George Stephanopoulos and those guys, to the cable networks, MSNBC. Chuck Todd's a dear friend of mine, but I know what happens at that network, and the same thing with CNN. Jake Tapper's a buddy of mine. I know what happens there. Now, look, the issue becomes, though, Fox News, I love those guys, they become the other extreme. So I really have no place to go. If I want something down the middle, something that's going to be somewhat honest, I can't really go to Fox News because they're going to pretty much apologize for Donald Trump and tell him what he does is great. And the other networks, they're going to malign him no matter what. So we're actually at a point right now where there's nowhere to go if you're somewhere down the middle and want real news. And that is the issue with America today. Look, 99% is negative about Donald Trump. It's completely unfair. It's not fact. You go back to the whole Mueller investigation. If you watch Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, you would have thought they had facts. They never had facts. You would have thought, quite frankly, Donald Trump was on trial. He was never on trial. Supposedly there were journalists giving out information. No, they weren't. They misled Americans every single night. And by the way, since the Mueller report has come out, some of it at least, not the official report, the ratings on MSNBC and CNN have suffered dramatically because people are like, hey, you've been lying to us for the last couple of months, for the last year, last 2 years. So the media plays a huge part in this. The media's become completely untrustworthy, completely liars, quite frankly. So at this point, they play a major part in part of the issues with politics, the president, and this country.
And I'm about to ask you a question that's completely unfair for me to ask you because I don't know the answer to it myself. I try to stick to questions that I already feel like I know I have the answer, but this one I have no answer, and I want your take because I respect it. And why do you think the media skews as left as it does? And I'm specifically talking about not just the politics media, because I think that's a little bit different. I'm talking about the sports media. And one of the questions that I always get on the website, on Twitter, for people who follow us is, sports is all about competition and it's a meritocracy. And people don't associate competition and meritocracy with liberalism. Like those are conservative traits. So why is it, in your mind, do you think, that the people who cover sports tend to skew so far left when really they're every day dealing in a business that is the ultimate meritocracy and the ultimate reward for hard work, not relying on other people?
Well, I think it starts long before you get to sports. It starts with academia. It starts with the news. And now it has, as you've mentioned, contaminated the world of sports. Look, I think where they're coming from is a place of open-mindedness, right? I mean, we care about the African-American athlete. So we're going to allow LeBron James and Kevin Durant to speak as if they know what's going on. Quite frankly, while I love to watch LeBron James play, he is ignorant. He is not up on the facts. And I think the media wants to play that game of everybody's equal, everybody's the same, everybody has their opinion, even when some folks are clearly ignorant and don't do their homework. That's just easier for them. I mean, think about it for a second. The NBA is almost 80% black, 80%. And most African Americans, if not all of them, vote Democrat. They're liberals. So why would the NBA go the other way? Same thing with the National Football League. Because these sports are so dominated by the black athlete, and most African Americans do vote Democrat and are liberal, that's going to be what you're hearing on television. And now even white people, like my good friend Max Kellerman, for example, he doesn't want to rock the boat. He's a Democrat anyway from New York City, but he's going to go on there and say basically what Stephen A. Smith is saying, because that's what the athletes want to hear. That's what the league are basically made up of, and that's what the fans are now. So I think in the end, they're just playing to the numbers, Dylan. I don't think it's a huge mystery. One league 80% black, one league 75% black. I think they're playing to the numbers.
Yeah, that is funny how like we hear about diversity, but when we talk about numbers about a league that's 80% black and how not diverse that is, but nobody wants to point out how that's not diverse.
Not diverse, but you have LeBron James. He's not that far removed from comparing owners in the NBA to slave owners. You had Kyle Korver for 19 years, made tons of money, had great success. Write an article with the Utah Jazz last week talking about white privilege. Now you got a black guy spewing what he believes, a white guy defending LeBron James. To call owners slave owners. I mean, look, I know we had our incident with the Clippers owner a couple of years ago, but the truth is these ball players are paid very handsomely. They make a lot more money than they should. I know the market calls for it, but they are treated like kings every single day in every aspect. And for LeBron James to say that was so disingenuous and so race baiting. These are the issues we've got in America. And I love LeBron. Covered in Miami for years. He's a magnificent player. And he is the type of guy that could really be a role model. Gives his money towards schools in Akron, does the right thing. But when he says things like that, it is so irresponsible and so divisive that for me, it almost takes away from some of the good.
Oh, absolutely, especially for somebody like him who has basically, completely destroyed and rebuilt every organization he's been to over the last 3 years. I mean, anybody who would have gotten, and I'm not saying that's wrong because he's a great player, but I mean, look what's happening in LA right now. I mean, you're not going to tell me that he's not aware of that,
No, he's aware of it. But look, if the league allows it, I mean, the fact is he started in Cleveland and he got blown out by San Antonio. He had a bad team. He decided he wanted to win. He teamed up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and Pat Riley down in Miami. Went to 4 successive NBA Finals, won 2 of those. Went back home, which I thought was really, really nice. Didn't have to do that. Found a way to bring a championship back to Cleveland. First time there in almost 60 years. And now he wanted to change his lifestyle. Went to Los Angeles. And of course he's in charge. Of course Luke Walton gets fired yesterday because that's what LeBron James wants. Of course Tyronn Lue, who coached LeBron James in Cleveland and won a championship, is number 1 now on the list for the new coach with Los Angeles because that's what LeBron James wants. But it didn't start with LeBron. Let me remind you guys that there was a time in Orlando when Hardaway was unhappy and the coach got fired. There was a time in Los Angeles when Magic Johnson was unhappy with Paul Westhead and they hired Pat Riley from the booth. So to think this all started with LeBron James is not true. The superstar has won the team in the NBA for many, many, many years. Now, LeBron has more talent than most, but then again, in the history of the game, he's got more talent than most, maybe everybody except for Michael Jordan.
Exactly right. And speaking of that, because I do want to get into some sportsy stuff here as well. Speaking of LeBron, obviously he was not successful in getting Anthony Davis to go to the team this year. In fact, the Hornets, their organization, the Pelicans organization, really stood up. I think these executives in the league are getting tired of LeBron being this home wrecker who just comes in, steals it, being the new hot chick in the neighborhood who just comes in and steals everybody's sugar daddy. You know what I mean? That's basically been what.
I think that's overstated. It's not like, you had Kyrie Irving in Cleveland, and you really think about it, the Miami years were one thing, but his 2 stints in Cleveland, he didn't have 5, 6 Hall of Famers on those teams, and Los Angeles certainly doesn't. I mean, you look at what's happened to the Lakers this offseason, and it's not all LeBron James. There's a reason why Magic Johnson has stepped down too, because he fumbled the ball like Ernest Biner in that Anthony Davis deal. The coach got fired too. So you're not going to fire LeBron, obviously, but he is not the sole issue there. He was not the whole problem. A tremendous shakeup when you consider the vice president and the coach are gone too, and much of that, along with the record, dates back to the problem with Anthony Davis getting him from the New Orleans Pelicans.
No, there's no question. There's no question it's not all on him. But do you think at this stage in his career, because he wasn't able to get Anthony Davis or anybody else, and I'm sure there were other things involved, like you mentioned with fumbling, like Biner, a very good analogy there. But, I mean, do you think at this point in LeBron's career, at this point at his age, that he's still capable of drawing another superstar player to come play? Because it seems like Father Time has caught up with him a little. You don't think?
Not age. LeBron James was still tremendous this year. Don't forget, before he got hurt, Christmas Day, the Lakers blew out the Golden State Warriors. And we were saying the end of December that the only team wasn't San Antonio, wasn't Oklahoma City, wasn't Houston with Harden. The only team that may be able to beat Golden State were the Lakers. And LeBron gets hurt, comes back after that. The team was never the same. They blow the Davis deal and it all falls apart. But certainly the first couple of months of the season, they were a formidable basketball team. He is still a phenomenal player, a great player, but there are issues. I mean, you heard Kevin Durant come out and say, nobody wants to play with this guy. LeBron James took exception to that, but maybe Kevin Durant is onto something. I've heard other guys in the media say the same thing, not just Kevin Durant, that it's become impossible to play with LeBron James. So it's not an issue of age. It's not an issue of talent. I still believe he's the best player in the world, still to this day. But there seems to be a personality issue with other players coming to play alongside LeBron. That's what he's got to fight in Los Angeles now. I think Magic Johnson stepped away because of that, quite frankly. So it's not ability, it's not age. It's can you coexist with LeBron James in Los Angeles? And that seems to be a very worthy question and a big deal for the Lakers.
Well, and a big part of that question is the in Los Angeles. Because remember, in Cleveland, he doesn't have the distractions in Cleveland that he has in Los Angeles. And now, obviously he's working on movies. He's got a television shows that he's working on with Tim Tebow. He's got more distractions now than he did before. And if you're one of these guys, if you're one of these prospective, trying to win a championship, trying to team up with LeBron, I don't know. Maybe you're a little concerned that his focus is still there.
Yeah, I covered LeBron James very closely for 4 years down in Miami. Got to know him just a little bit. I don't know him well. I'm not Dwayne Wade, but I don't buy that. When he's out there on the court, he's not thinking about movies. He's not thinking about television shows. He's not thinking about President Trump. He's out there to win, and I still think that's the case. So yes, he's doing more things in Los Angeles. That's why he went there. That's why he didn't go to back to Cleveland or some other place. He wanted to change his lifestyle. He does have aspirations to do movies. He's got his own production company, I guess. So there's no question he has now diversified the LeBron James logo, and he's a much bigger player in the world than just a basketball player. But when he's out there playing, he wants to win. That's not the issue. It's not distractions. It's not his other interests. It's whether or not you can coexist on that basketball court and in that locker room with LeBron James. And that seems to be a major question today.
What do you make of this Antonio Brown situation and how ugly this got? Because this seemed to get really ugly really quick. Like at first, okay, he doesn't get along with Ben. He wants to make a ton of money. He wants to go to LA. He wants to go to the West Coast. He wants to do his own thing. That's normal stuff. But it seemed like you put this together with the Le'Veon Bell situation he wants to go to. The Steelers have lost their 2 best players in the last year with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. And now the racial angle brought in this last week with Rashard Mendenhall, and it seems and everything with Juju Smith-Schuster, Antonio Brown taking a shot at Juju Smith-Schuster. Why did this get so ugly? And what is going on with Pittsburgh, and why do these guys want out?
Well, I don't know. I'm not in that huddle. I'm not in that locker room. I mean, both Le'Veon Bell and now member of the New York Jets and Antonio Brown, Oakland Raiders, have had some things to say about the quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. They won quite a bit with Ben when they were there. Now that they're gone, they both have some negative things to say about him. Look, the Rooney family is a special family. They're one of the great owners in the history of sports. That Pittsburgh Steelers organization has had 3 coaches in about 50 years, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and now, of course, Mike Tomlin. And they find a way to win, and they win big. But the Rooneys don't spend a lot of money. And if you look at the history of the Steelers, even with Bill Cowher, they would lose great players every year. Charles Johnson, Kevin Green. I mean, year after year, their Pro Bowl players, Rod Woodson, they would eventually leave the team because the Rooneys wouldn't pay them. So I think when you combine that with the fact that there was some issue with Ben Roethlisberger and these guys, I think those two things made for a combustible situation. You know, Antonio Brown, all the Raiders had to give up was a 3rd and a 5th. Le'Veon Bell, of course, signed with the New York Football Jets. But for Giant fans that complained about the Beckham trade to Cleveland, at least there was a first rounder in that deal. Antonio Brown, every bit as good as Beckham, goes for a 3rd and a 5th.
I couldn't believe that.
Happy with that. So I think when you combine the Rooney spending habits, Roethlisberger, and some stuff we just don't know and may never know, it doesn't really surprise me. Both of those guys are gone.
When you look at it, obviously we're only a couple weeks away from the draft. A huge draft, I think, not just in the league in general, but for the Giants too. Obviously, and the Jets have a high pick in this draft. But before we get to them, what happens at number 1? Are you buying all this about Kyler Murray going to be that people are acting like this is already going to happen? He's going to go to Arizona. He's going to reunite with his old coach there, and that's going to be it. What do you think? Do you think that happens? And if it does, what do you think happens to Josh Rosen?
Well, it's funny watching Jalen Hurts. Alabama fans know Jalen Hurts very, very well until Tua took over in that big game 2 in this season. Jalen is now the quarterback at Oklahoma. He replaced Kyler Murray. He transferred this offseason, had his first spring game actually yesterday and did very, very well. I do think that Kyler Murray goes to Arizona. Josh, coming out of UCLA, good quarterback. Played okay last year at times. But the upside for Kyler Murray is just way too big to let him go for Josh Rosen. I think eventually the Cardinals will trade him, maybe on draft day, I guess. I don't know. But I am buying the hype. I do think Kyler Murray goes number 1. Haskins out of Ohio State, that's a whole other story. And, of course, the Giants talking an awful lot about replacing Eli Manning next year, if not late this year. They've got 2 picks in the first round at number 6 and 17. Maybe Haskins will be there, maybe not. Maybe the Giants want a pass rusher early, maybe grab a guy like Donnie Jones out of Duke later on in the first round. I don't know, but I am buying Kyler Murray to Arizona, number 1 overall. And what happens with Josh Rosen, we'll just have to see. They can trade that guy. There's enough teams out there who need a young quarterback, and Rosen can play in this league.
Did Eli rehab his image in New York last year? I mean, are people what? Because 2 years ago, obviously, people were ready to run him out of town. I think I remember seeing you tweet about it. You were ready to move on from 10. I think was your tweet. You were ready to be done with it, whatever.
Yeah, but I'm in the minority, Dylan. To be honest, Giant fans. It's kind of like the President Trump supporters. Okay, Trump can do no wrong, even when he does wrong. Reminds me of The Sopranos when a very coked up and drunk Al Pacino stood up and says, "I never lie, even when I do." It's almost like you're going to believe him no matter what he says. So, same thing with Giant fans and Eli. This guy brought 2 Super Bowls to New York City, and they love him forever. I can't tell you, hosting shows on WFAN as late as 2014, the hate tweets I was getting from Giant fans who were like, "Sid, he brought us 2 Super Bowls. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame," which he is, almost 50,000 yards, touchdown. And all this is true. But the fact is, 6 of the last 7 years, the Giants have not made the playoffs. He is a mistake waiting to happen. He had a very good statistical season last year. That's very deceiving because he dumped off a lot of passes and kept himself out of harm's way. But the truth is, he's been done for a couple of years. But the Giants and Giant fans love this guy, always will. Won twice as many Super Bowls as Phil Simms, and he will go down in Giant lore as the greatest quarterback of all time. So I'm in the minority. I'm one of those guys that for years has said his skills are eroding. It's time to move on. But even now, after another losing season, most Giant fans will find a way to defend Eli Manning.
I think that I sense that too, just from being on Giants Twitter and scouring that. It's amazing too, because they complained about him an awful lot when they weren't winning before, and now they can't get rid of the guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting. That well, what about the other team in town, Sam Darnold? Did he? Do you think that? What did you think of his rookie year?
Oh, I thought he showed some real flashes of brilliance. That first game, Monday Night Football, beating the Lions was amazing. Then he got hurt, wasn't really good. But the last couple of weeks, I thought we saw how good this kid could be. I know they played the Houston Texans, second last game of the year, and O'Brien, the Texans head coach, said, "Man, this kid is special," and I really do think he is. So, they now added Le'Veon Bell, one of the best running backs in football, maybe second best to Barkley with the Giants, to that Darnold offense. They added a big-time offensive guard from the Raiders, a multiple Pro Bowler. They added Jamison Crowder, the former Washington Redskin, a slot wide receiver. So he's got some real weapons now, especially Bell. I think Darnold's in for a big, big year for the Jets. And their coach, Adam Gase, I know the last 3 years was not very good with the Dolphins, but the truth is his quarterbacks there were an old, used-up Jay Cutler, an injured and overrated Brian Tannenbaum, a career backup in Moore. I mean, and of course, the kid from the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos, not a very good quarterback anyway. Those are his four quarterbacks down in Miami. When he had a young Jay Cutler in Chicago, did a very good job. When he had Peyton Manning in Denver, they got to the Super Bowl. When he had Tim Tebow in Denver, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs. So I'm interested to see just what Adam Gase can do in year two with Sam Darnold. I think he's the right guy. Better players on offense. I think New York is really going to enjoy the play of Sam Darnold.
No, I think so too. I liked him at USC. And he had probably the most inauspicious start of any quarterback in NFL history, the pick six on the first throw.
Right.
But,
when he went out to win that football game, it looked really good doing it. So
exactly.
They were ready to have the ticker tape parade in New York, a bit premature, which is nothing new for New York City. But I think this kid's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, New York has never shied away from a ticker tape parade. No question about that. And I've been to a few of them when I used to live there and the Yankees were winning. And you deserve one, Sid, for doing this. I appreciate the time, buddy. If I had ticker tapes or a canyon of heroes, I would definitely douse you with all the ticker tapes.
Oh, thank you.
I really appreciate it, and I've admired your work for a long time, and I really have. And you've never shied away from shooting people straight. And whether it's politics or sports or anything like that, and there's not a disingenuine bone in your body, and everybody needs to know that, So it really has been awesome having you on the show, and especially I'm so glad we were able to get you first, and a whole long line of Skype interviews that we're gonna do. You set the bar very high, my friend.
Well, thank you. You're a terrific talent, too. I've enjoyed the couple of times you've hung out together in Indianapolis and here in New York. You're a great – I read your stuff all the time. I love Breitbart, by the way. I love it. And specifically your stuff. When you contacted me, I was like, really? You want to talk to me? You don't want Sean Hannity? You don't want Bill O'Reilly? You want me? And it turns out that this was a wonderful opportunity and a great discussion. And I hope we could do it again real soon, Dylan. This was quite a thrill for me. Thank you.
Oh, no question. We'll definitely do it again, and I'm gonna hit stop on the record here and let you know it's gonna cut me off the second I hit stop. So at the risk of being abrupt, I just want to say thanks again. You're a great host and a great guy, and everybody should check out your show on WABC in the mornings with Bernard McGurk and Sid Rosenberg. If you want great, unbiased sports talk, or if you want biased sports talk in favor of President Trump, something you're never going to hear anywhere else, then make sure to listen to Sid's co-host, because that's what you're going to get.
Listen, he's a smart guy, and he knows the issues, and he speaks from an educated place, Bernard. He really, really does. Yeah. And it's good to have somebody on the air every now and then that can kind of right the wrongs. And listen, we do a very diverse show Monday through Friday, 6 to 10. On any given day, we've had President Trump on, like you said, but we'll go from Chuck Todd to Kevin Costner to Phil Simms. That's the Bernie and Sid show. And then, of course, every Sunday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. here on WABC, I do a very traditional sports talk show, much in the WFAN mode, which is just straight sports. But 6 days a week, we kill it here at WABC. And my partner, Bernard McGurk, is a major reason for that.
No question. And it takes a special guy to be friends with Chuck Todd and Sean Hannity. And that's you.
That's right.
You may be the only guy.
I talk to Chuck Todd on this show every Friday and Bill O'Reilly on this show every Thursday, and email Sean Hannity at least once a week. And by the way, if you've noticed the last 2 days, My show's made a lot of news because Chuck Todd said to me and Bernie on this show yesterday that he doesn't even know who the hell Chris Cuomo is. That was an hour ago and hit about 30 different publications yesterday. So that's me. Like I said, very open-minded, very rational. I can talk to Chuck Todd and Bill O'Reilly and be just as happy.
There you go. And I wish I didn't know who Chris Cuomo was, but unfortunately I do. Sid, you're the best, brother, and we'll definitely have you on again. Thank you so much for taking some time out, especially on a Saturday, brother.
Thank
you.
All right?
Thank you. Bye-bye.